Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here in Southborough, the COVID-19 edition. If you haven't seen the show before, my name is Art Bergeron. My day job, I'm an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell. I do nothing but elder law. Our offices are right in Westborough. But this is not about elder law. This is about my friends Frank and Mary. If you've been to one of the presentations at the senior center that I do, you know that Frank and Mary's goal in life is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if it's Southborough, you want to stay right here. And this is the COVID-19 addition to the show, because now you're Frank and Mary and you really are worried that you might die. So you're needing to pay attention to all this stuff. So we're bringing in a lot of folks to talk through kind of how folks are dealing with all of this and how they can be dealing with all of this. You all know my co-host, Doug Peck, is a wonderful person who runs something called Seniors Helping Seniors. That's his day job, really connecting seniors with other seniors who need help at home. But he's been kind enough, since he's a Southborough resident, to work with me and find all of these great guests. Although this time we both know the guests. But Doug, you want tell us who you have convinced to be on our show today?
Well, it didn't take much convincing. We have Rebecca Wild-Wesley on once more. She is an aging life care specialist. Used to be called a geriatric care manager. And she has a practice in this area. I wanted to have her on for a couple of reasons. One is because she is still practicing and seeing seniors. She can give us some information about really what's been concerning some of the people that she's seeing. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about planning, because we know that COVID's going to be here for a while. And I want her to talk a little bit about what kind of planning should some of our seniors be doing. Should, for example, the caregiver get sick? You know, what's going to happen? What do we need to think about? So I have a number of questions for Rebecca, but I'll just open up with saying, hi, Rebecca. How are you today?
And I'm just going to insert a plug. So
Okay.
As Doug has said, Doug has known Rebecca, and I have too. And she's dealt with a bunch of clients of mine, and she's terrific. I just want to throw that in.
Okay.
Thank you.
And her background is also that. So I thought having someone with a medical background was particularly important, because people have a lot of medical concerns nowadays. So Rebecca, what have you been seeing with some of your clients?
Yeah, so the seeing has been so different, because for the most part, we can't see our clients. So we're talking to their caregivers at home. Sometimes we have the opportunity to do a Zoom call, and we're actually trying to help seniors do Zoom calls, some of them for the first time, to learn how to engage on the phone. So that's a little bit of the fun stuff. We are generally, people in my profession, they'll feel like sometimes we're sitting on our hands because we don't get to be face-to-face with our clients. And this is where we think of that as our sweet spot, where we get that opportunity to build relationship and, see someone in their home, in the place that they love so much. So we've had to learn to adapt, which is really good for our brains, as we're adapting all the time. And I think the new word is pivot. We're learning how to pivot. And for us, we're finding people who had a relatively careful, well thought out, good, quote, plan for care, which could well often include attending a day program, now don't have that day program. And the day program was an integral part of keeping them stable and living in their home, which is a real priority for a lot of our clients. So what we have discovered is we have caregivers calling saying, what am I going to do if I get sick or if my loved one gets sick? And so we're really having to talk through with those people functionally, what kind of services do we need to put into place? Because someone who's used to a nice structured program a couple of days a week now is home 7 days a week after week. So part of the benefit we have is that we know we have partners, we have companies who are able to come into the home and do some care. So we're able to put some of those kinds of services into place. But I think in a bigger picture, we're really talking to families and caregivers and saying, so if you get sick, that's one thing as the caregiver. If your loved one gets sick, where do you want them to be? because we know the likelihood of a significantly older, frail adult will be that they will have this illness, and it will be very difficult to survive. So we're having much more immediate conversations about how to make the most form, put it into action. Where do you want to be? Do you want to have your loved one go into a hospital without being able to go in and see them? Where do you want them if they're going to die? Where would you like them to be? And we don't normally have that kind of urgent questioning. It's more theoretical when we fill out our advanced directives and our most form. So sometimes we have to go right to the heart of the matter, and then we back up and say, okay, now if you know you want to have your loved one at home, these are all the things we have to think about. And it's kind of like, let's go to the most important, and then we'll back up and functionally figure out how we're going to carry that out.
So they are difficult conversations, but this is the time, what I hear you saying is to sort of plan for the worst case situation. We don't always want to think about that. We never want to think about that.
Never.
But
Right.
this is the time when we have to think about that and hope that it doesn't happen, but it really needs now to be planned for. Is that correct?
That's correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And by the way, I'm seeing exactly those kinds of questions surfacing with my clients.
Right.
That you finally have people who never want to talk about this stuff, right? And certainly don't want to talk about it with their kids, you know, and the kids haven't typically wanted to talk about it. But now all of a sudden, there's this realization that from out of nowhere, you know, you could get very unpleasantly surprised and it could happen quickly. And so to need to have that, you may not have all of this extra time, or if you have that unfortunate, you know, you decline and now you're in the hospital and nobody can reach you, now it's really hard to do that plan, right? And so to be able to have it ahead of time, that's really great. That's really great.
Well, and having the plan, if you don't have COVID, there's a blessing, but you've now done some really hard work. And now you have that, you know, that is in place. And, you know, planning for COVID is like planning that you might have a stroke also, or something else that is catastrophic and life-changing. It really helps you to, and COVID's forced those conversations. And maybe these are one of the things we take away from this horrendous illness. We've got to find those silver linings or those positives. And I think hopefully we're getting people to talk about what's really important when they feel a sense of urgency to do that.
Yeah. Now the most form, just to back up a little bit, that's a healthcare directive that you generally fill out with your doctor. Is that correct?
That's correct. Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes I'll tell you, we will pre-talk it with family. We'll talk about what some of the language is going to be, when they use it, that this isn't something your attorney does for you, it's something your doctor does with you. Mm-hmm. But because the concepts are big when you talk about it, and when you have to sign it, it's nice to think about it in advance. So for some people, we'll say, this is a form, this is what it looks like, these are some of the questions, and these are some of the realities. For other people, they have their most, but maybe they've decided that maybe they don't want some of the extraordinary measures, but they still want to go to a hospital. Mm-hmm. You should think about that again. Mm-hmm. The hospital used to not be a negative thing for seniors. Maybe it's not the place they want to be in the event they get COVID. So it's not about us signing it. We're not the doctor, mm-hmm. But it's about having people think about what they might have signed at some point in the past when things didn't seem so urgent, and now there's teeth. You know, they need to, you know, this MOLS form helps them to be able to understand where they want to receive ill care, sick care.
Mm-hmm. And are you finding, Rebecca, that folks are kind of going beyond that question and trying to think out better what it would mean to be staying at home, at home during the last days or weeks of their lives, and figuring out what the kind of care is? Because I know that once again, you always hear that statistic, you know, 80% of people say they want to die at home, 20% of people do.
That's right.
But a lot of times people say they want to die at home, but they haven't. What that means in their head is that if their heart stops, they don't want it to start. What it doesn't mean in their head is that they may be at home for a prolonged period, and that therefore being at home itself may have real planning implications to it, right? So
And
are you
this is
talking about
much
more about that? Yep.
It's more sick care. We don't usually anticipate as we age that we're going to have an illness that creates a need for the kind of standard bedside sick care. We usually think we'll decline because of cancer, or our heart will just start to fail. And it's more about being comfortable. It's not always going to be about keeping a fever down, having to take deep breaths and having to have your lungs kind of jiggle to keep them from consolidating. And it's not, I don't think anybody has ever thought that they would be acutely sick before they die. We've thought we'd have more of the declining illnesses that are much more common nowadays, that will die of end-stage dementia, Alzheimer's disease kinds of illnesses, or again, cardiac illness where congestive failure just really takes over. It's a different kind of care. It's bedside. When we think of bedside nursing, that's what families will have to take on and conceivably need to have formal help with that, which would be like the kinds of help you would get from a private duty agency, perhaps from hospice, perhaps from a visiting nurse. This is sick care.
So is it possible even now for families to come in if the person has COVID and is really sick at home? I mean, because that must be a big risk as well to bring families in. That means grandchildren, the children themselves. Can you even do that at home now? Would it be advisable?
I would suggest it becomes a lot more up to that family than it has been when they have someone in a hospital or a nursing home. They really haven't had that choice.
Yeah.
It's your home.
Yeah.
I'm sure Art could speak to the rights of people being at home. You have a lot more rights. I think those are family conversations that perhaps again can be facilitated with care managers or maybe the primary care doctor, to be able to understand what are the risks and what is it that you're willing to accept. It's less likely that we're worried about, when we wear masks, it's because we want to protect people from us. And it's not that we're wanting to wear a mask to be protected from that other person. So it's about personal agency, I think. And that's going to have to be decided in a family as to what is the risk that what risk tolerance do they have for being in a sick room with a loved one, particularly possibly at the end of life. So those families with good advice can make those decisions.
That's really interesting, because I really hadn't really kind of thought about it from that perspective, because I suppose one of the, we'll say the good news and the bad news about what we've learned about COVID over the last 3 months, right, is that the elderly are particularly sensitive, right? And the bad news, as we were talking about before the show, is that as a result, a lot of people are just going about their business now. Younger people, being very cavalier about this because they don't think it's going to hit them, and they're not really worried about somebody's grandmother who might work at the restaurant, But the good news from the situation you just described is that you may have the kids or grandchildren really saying to themselves, yes, I'm okay with visiting grandma. I know that she's got COVID. I know that I'm taking a risk, right? But she's going to have a mask, and hey, I'm willing to take this risk. It's grandma. And my likelihood, even if I'm exposed, is relatively good that I'm going to be okay. So it really does make people kind of think differently about it. That's really fascinating. That's fascinating.
Well, I think we have to take personal responsibility. And I think that's been the struggle when we think about times when we might be wearing a mask and someone else isn't. But this is really about how that family operates. It's less about the public now.
Yeah.
And I do find that people who are in the younger age group are pretty cognizant that they have a family member who's older. They're pretty careful. I've seen that personally in my family. I've seen that with extended others who consider that they're in a risk category if they have a loved one at home who's over 60 and vulnerable. they operate differently. And that's how families work, is that feeling of being responsible. And if there's a young child in the home that has has high risk, I think people are making those choices. We don't maybe have that experience if we're just out in a public venue. We may see what we think of as cavalier, not wearing masks, being close. But when it comes to family, I bet you it's different. I'm going to make an assumption and hope for that.
Yeah. This, I mean, I'm not plugging anybody, but I think this is really the time for people who really want to either, stay at home or are serious about a plan, to think about who they can go to that can facilitate this conversation with the family.
Yeah.
It's not going to be your primary care physician. They don't have the time to do it, nor do they have the overall people skills and be able to have a family discussion around this. So I think they should really think about who could we bring in to do this, and a care manager, whether it's Rebecca or anybody that you choose, are the people that have these kind of skills and experiences to do this. And I'm assuming you sort of have a plan to you can facilitate an hour discussion around this, or a family discussion around this. It may be more than one discussion. Families may have to go back and say, okay, just like you said, Arthur, I never thought about this before like this. What are we going to do? We need to talk about this as a family, just in case, because this is clearly the type of decision you don't want to make in a crisis.
That's right. That's right.
And I guess this.
I know, I was going to just say really quickly, we do specifically have a program for families that's literally a family coronavirus plan.
Okay.
And it's an opportunity for them to call, to have a family call, to be able to talk with one of us, to be able to imagine and think through what will we do. About an hour and a half, because that's what it takes to talk about stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
A little pre-work, and then we offer them kind of a summary of what we talked about. And I think many care managers would welcome this opportunity, because not only for our existing clients, but for people, I think this is going to force people to be thinking about things that they haven't had to think about before. Again, maybe a blessing of the coronavirus is it's going to be forcing families to think of hard stuff sooner than they might have chosen to do that.
I could just add something, Di. I think when I try to point people, well, to Rebecca and to other geriatric care managers, so often, we've done presentations together, Doug, and one of the lines is, so what is a geriatric care manager exactly? This is what a geriatric care manager is exactly. Exactly. This is trying to figure this out. And one of the things that I try to emphasize to people is that beyond figuring out the plan, a piece of this is figuring out who's implementing that plan. And a piece of that is certainly Rebecca's advice regarding family members and how they can work together and all of that. But also a big piece is knowing the resources out there, whether it's seniors helping seniors or others, and helping seniors figure out who's who. Because this is not, you're not going to be looking to go interview all these people,
right,
and figure this stuff out. You're stuck at home yourself, or you've got these limitations, or you're the family and you're far away. So to be able to know who's who on the ground, and that really means, I know Rebecca's been very good. I know I've talked to her about clients that aren't in this immediate area, and she's just referred me to folks in that area, because she said, I know all of the players here. That's one of the things I know. I can't say I know all of the players in Danvers, or in the western part of the state. So you really, a piece of looking for of this whole process is A, convincing yourself that you need a geriatric care manager, and then B, finding out who's local, right? That can really give you that advice.
That's right.
Just as a
the good
thought.
news is too, Rebecca knows, many other care managers in different parts of, particularly sort of the Metro Boston, Metro West, even the state, because of the way it's arranged. So, you can always get a good referral, because sometimes your parents, you may live here, your parents may not, or vice versa. So there's a wealth of information if you go to the right person. So I just thought this was really important.
That's what care managers like to do, is to do a little research and spread it out, to give it. I think that's one of the things we enjoy and we're good at. finding the right solution for someone and then sending them on their way to do, to pursue that.
Yeah. So again, I just thought this was such an important topic, hard discussions to have, but certainly this time is critical, given that the fact that it's not going away. We're still seeing a number of deaths, rise, and we know how vulnerable the senior population is. We want to make sure they have the best advice possible.
And just to check, Rebecca, so I know that Doug has mentioned this on the show, that one of his in conversations, one of his challenges now, among other things, is finding seniors who are normally helping seniors, but are now nervous about going to those seniors' houses because of this whole COVID thing. Are you finding that issue is becoming really a challenge for a lot of these folks, a lot of the home care agencies? Or are you finding that is starting to resolve itself now that there is more testing? Or I guess the real question is, how are folks dealing with that? Are people requiring testing? How are folks dealing with it?
So I would say yes to all of that. It was a question, but
I didn't know that was a yes or no question.
I know, you didn't know that. But really, I found every agency is dealing with it differently. Every assisted living is dealing with it differently. Some are very, very, very conservative. I was on a meeting today with an assisted living, and the 2 employees there were wearing goggles and masks and behind closed doors and gloves. Still, that much PPE in order to feel that they could afford their residents the best protection. And other places, you're less likely to see that level. Everybody's doing it differently. The same is true, I think, with the home care companies. I do think what's unique about Seniors Helping Seniors is it's what it brings to their clients is a more mature caregiver who are already also in that risk category. So that's much more difficult. And I think part of our job as employers is to be able to equip people, to be able to give them the most confidence and training and skill to be able to assure them that the very best has been done to be able to help them to feel safe. Ultimately, I think, though, for the most part, we can't force people into an environment where they don't feel comfortable. So we do our best to support them and shore them up and educate them. And really, the reality is most of us are going out some. So being able to equate the risk of seeing somebody in a backyard and sitting outside is the same risk or even less of a risk than going to a grocery store and buying your groceries. So you try to, I think, deliver information for us to understand the information that's available for safety and to translate that, to be able to help people feel confident about being able to return to work. Everybody wants to work. I think if people are employed now, they want to work. We just need to equip them to be able to feel comfortable in that environment.
Yeah.
And Doug, from your perspective now, I know we talked about this kind of earlier on in the COVID. How are folks adapting at Seniors Helping Seniors?
Well, we still are serving clients. What we're trying to do, we've equipped them with as much PPE as they need or they want. And we still have many people that want to work but are just not ready to go back.
Right.
What we've done, though, is one of the big things is that we just have one senior helping senior going to one client. They don't go to multiple clients. So they go just to one, whether it's 1 time a week or 5 times a week, they're just going to that one client. So that really limits the exposure that they have and the exposure to our clients from going to multiple places. So that's how we are trying to contain it. And we're trying to be very careful. They sort of, we're relying on them. Again, they're mature individuals to sort of self-evaluate. They haven't had a fever. They're wearing all the PPE. They're being very, very careful otherwise of where they go. And, we're getting as much information from our clients in terms of their exposure. Have they been out a lot? Often the cases they haven't been. They've been at home for several months. So going in is relatively safe if you're going in with the proper, again, PPE protection, the mask, sometimes a face shield, gloves, and then coming back and, really washing your hands all the time that you're there. And we are limiting we try to limit as well. We're not going in for 6 or 8 hours. We may be going in for 2 hours. So you're going in, just for a shorter period of time. So it's a shorter period of an exposure.
So I guess that that really brings up something that's special about seniors helping seniors. While in the nature of your clientele, it really fits with the nature of your helpers.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's one group that's going to be sensitive to all these issues right now. It's seniors.
Right.
So if you've got a senior who is coming into your home, you are sure they're paying attention.
Yes.
Right? They really want to be paying attention.
They're really paying attention, and they really care enough to be going out to see you. And they really can empathize and understand what the family is going through, because I can almost guarantee it, their family is going through the same thing in some fashion.
Right.
So Doug, of course, as usual, this was a great idea. You inevitably get these great guests to come on, and I think, Rebecca, I think it's just, heartening for people,
Mm-hmm.
to understand there are other people going through it, but also to give them this kind of a system, some way to be dealing with this and not just be letting it sit in your head, which is the problem with, I know it's true for me, we have all these anxieties and they sit as a cloud. So to be able to have somebody professional that they can talk to, I think is just a wonderful resource. So I want to thank Rebecca for coming on. Folks, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank Doug. I think, maybe you may not appreciate that one of the gifts that you have here in Southborough. Well, you have Rebecca who lives close, but you have Doug who is right here. And sometimes we don't appreciate many of the resources that we have like right here.
Thanks,
and I think this really kind of gives you a sense of how important those things are. So thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Doug. Folks, thank you very much for watching. Thanks again to the wonderful folks at Southborough Cable for being able to work with us on these shows, and especially Terry Underwood. And we will look forward to seeing you again on the next installment of Frank and Mary here in Southborough, the COVID-19 edition. Thank you very much.
Thanks.